Welcome to Cast of Wonders, fiction audio magazine for young adults featuring stories of the fantastic. I'm Graham Dunlop. Today we present part 2 of Saved by Aaron Greenwood, read by Alasdair Stewart. If you didn't catch part 1, please go back and listen to episode 16. Now, we gave Aaron's bio last episode, but again, my fabulous research skills have led me wrong. I implied that Aaron is a boy, when in fact Aaron is a girl. My very humble apologies to Aaron for getting it wrong. So it's worth giving the bio again with the correct gender. So Aaron is a second-year undergraduate at the Uni of Washington, studying chemical engineering with a focus in nanotechnology. Apart from writing and reading, she is a dedicated musician and a member of the Husky Marching Band at the UW. She attended the prestigious Alpha Young Writers Workshop in Pittsburgh for 2 consecutive summers. Okay, I hope that sets the record straight. And now, we've a tale to tell.
The next day dragged on for a month. The minute hand on Sky's watch seemed to run on molasses. He didn't listen to his teachers, got yelled at for not answering a question he didn't hear. All he could think of was Emma. Actually, he thought more of his mother, how traumatised she'd be to lose her daughter when she'd lived the last 8 years a widow. It would be too much for her to bear, he knew that. In truth, he wasn't entirely sure if he'd be able to live with just his mother. Emma, as much as she drove him nuts, kept a balance between him and their mom, who had never gotten along, even when Sky was young. He couldn't stand how she was always trying and failing to make everything seem so light and fluffy. She talked about Sky's dad that way too, like it was no big deal that he died, but she did a horrible job of hiding her grief. Sky desperately wished she'd just stop talking about him, the way he constantly tried to stop thinking about him. Sky sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window with a can of Coke. He made an effort to clear his mind, to calm down, but he worried for his sister, for his mother and himself. There was no way he could let her die, not with knowing she had less than 2 hours to live, but it was the kind of thing you couldn't really think about, he had found, because if you did, you convinced yourself you were making a stupid decision and talk yourself out of it. Plus, you drive yourself crazy picturing your sister lying dead. "Sky!" Emma called, nearly running into the kitchen table as she came zooming into the room. Talk of the devil, Sky thought. "What, Em? I want to ride my bike to the park. Mom won't take me and she won't let me go by myself." Was this it? Sky asked himself as his heart rate quickened. Was this how she was going to die? Riding a bike into the street, maybe, and getting hit by a car? No, he wouldn't allow it. No. "What do you mean, no? You could bring your bike too. We could race, and then chase that cute poodle who's always there." She half jumped, half shook herself. She had too much energy for someone about to die. He considered telling her the truth. Then she could protect herself. No, he couldn't scare her like that. She was only 11. 11-year-olds aren't meant to die. "I'm way faster than you," he settled on. "Plus, I have too much homework." She raised an eyebrow. "Then why are you just sitting here?" He couldn't come up with an appropriate lie to counter that. I just can't, Em, okay? I'm sorry. Some other time, but there would be no other time. He had been purposefully avoiding her eyes the whole time, but now he raised his gaze. A peculiar expression crossed his face and his mouth opened slightly. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Sky didn't answer. 78 minutes. 80 minutes, 79 minutes, 84 minutes. Her lifetime bounced up and down unpredictably. He watched it for just a few minutes while Emma blurted out questions he didn't hear. It decreased normally by 1-minute increments, but rose capriciously, sometimes by 1 minute, sometimes by 5 or more. He couldn't say exactly why, but it reminded him of his father's death, a small detail he hadn't remembered until just now. In the last minutes before he died, his lifetime, though Sky didn't know completely what it was at the time, jumped from its normal minutes, a number in the millions, to less than 10 in just less than a second. At 8, Sky hadn't yet experienced death. He knew the numbers he saw had to stay high to be good, and it was bad for them to not maintain consistency, but he didn't connect it with anything at all. And in a split second he understood. His father had been healthy. He wasn't meant to die, but something had altered the way of death. That something was him saving Gabriella. He had saved Gabriella in the pool that same day his father died. He had saved Nate just 2 days ago, and that was when Miss Ackland died. It was like something was telling him not to mess with death. It was his fault. It was his fault his father had died. But Nate's lifetime hadn't jumped down like Emma's was doing. Now that he thought of it, actually, Nate's had always been considerably lower than everyone else's. He mentally slapped himself for not connecting it before, but Nate was alive, still, with his lifetime higher than Sky had ever remembered it being. His thoughts were so jumbled, coherent not even to himself, he barely heard his sister. "Earth to Sky!" Emma called, waving her hands in his face and laughing hysterically. It was an old joke, one she'd used for years, one Sky had never found particularly amusing, but it would crack her up every time she used it. This time, it forced a knot in his stomach to tighten to the point where he found it hard to breathe. "Sky, what is with you? You're not being fun." "Okay," Sky sighed. "Okay. I'm going to take you to the park, but promise me. Promise me you'll be careful." "What am I for?" She scowled. Sky ignored her. He stood up and grabbed a jacket that had been lying on the back of a chair. Never mind, come on." The only reason he took her to the park was because, to his extent of knowledge on the subject of prophecies and other such things, they come true whether you try to avoid seemingly dangerous circumstances or not. And Sky wanted to be with her at all times so he could protect her. If he just left her and ran off to do something else, it would essentially be his fault she died, like it was his fault his father died, and Miss Ackland, and the person who would die to counterbalance Emma's life. This time, he felt it would be a person even closer than his teacher, or his father. Maybe him. His conscience yelled at him, screaming the logic in his face. He could die. Why should he risk his own life for that of his sister? Not that he knew for sure that he would die. If he didn't know, someone else would. It was a matter of suicide or murder. Could she be sent to jail for accidental murder? Would it be suicide if you didn't plan it? He walked behind Emma, trying to keep a fast pace, to stay in close proximity with her bike. He didn't know what to do anymore. That's the problem with logic, he told himself. Thinking in general, really. If you keep thinking long enough, you'll come up with some reason that your brilliant plan is really a stupid plan that could end up with you or someone you love dead. His heart pounded through his ears, the knot in his stomach tightened. Watching Emma circle the lush park took his mind away from tracking the time. He sat on a bench beneath a large maple tree and almost laughed as Emma stopped every 20 feet or so, hopped off her bike, and bent down to pet a poodle or a lab. He had intentionally not worn a watch, so as not to make him even more anxious, but he couldn't help but notice Emma's lifetime as she sped by him. 29 minutes. No, 45. The intervals were getting larger each time, and Sky still had no idea what that meant. 17 minutes. No. What the hell was going on? 17 one second and 1,000 the next. Back to 17. Whatever was controlling her lifetime seriously had trouble making decisions. He couldn't stand it anymore, just sitting there unable to do anything about anything. He stood up. "Emma, we're leaving. Now." And immediately headed for the gate, not waiting for his sister. If he waited for her, she'd find a way to talk him into staying longer. He had changed his mind whilst watching her. She would be safer in her own home, not out in the open where anything could happen. 12 minutes. He heard the chatter of a chain and the screech of bicycle tyres on asphalt just behind him. He quickened his pace as Emma scooted by him, now leading the way home. 10 minutes. What was he going to do when her time ran out? He didn't know how he could live through another death, and as he saw it, this one was guaranteed whether he saved her or not. Though if he died, 5 minutes, Emma was still less than 3 feet in front of him, pedalling rapidly to make it up the steep hill they'd come to. How would he know what to look out for? 2 minutes. A man with wisps of long grey hair and wrinkled skin came out of a thrift shop and stared at Sky for a moment before taking his own route down some alley. When Emma's lifetime dropped to under 1 minute and began counting in seconds, she flew down the other side of the hill, strawberry blonde ponytail flapping in the wind. Adrenaline filled his body and Sky began to run. He had to catch up with her, but a bike was a whole lot faster than a boy on foot. The street at the bottom of the hill was deserted, but even so, Skye suddenly knew how she was supposed to die. She was going too fast, unable to stop. He saw the handlebars jerk to one side, almost crashing her into a wall. She fought for control, straightened out, but going faster than ever. She screamed Skye's name at the top of her lungs, but to him, it was barely a whisper. 26 seconds. Skye lost his balance, running too fast downhill, and nearly tripped over his own foot. But he was gaining on her. She had slowed down slightly as the ground began to level out, and he had sped up. He was almost close enough to reach out and touch her. That was what he managed to do 18 seconds later. He was near enough to her that he could stretch his arm out and grab onto the crossbar. The bike crashed on top of Skye. Emma sprawled over that, not even an inch away from the street. The tour bus sped by, almost brushing Emma's hand. If Skye hadn't knocked her down, she would have rammed straight into it. Nobody could have survived such an impact. The brilliant rays of autumn sun shone through the almost bare branches of the numerous trees, warming Skye Sullivan's neck and making him yawn. He thought of his father, who had died when Skye was 8, the counter-effect of Skye having saved the life of his Gabriella. But he thought of the fun he and his father had had together, the places they'd gone, the things they'd seen, the stories they'd created. He smiled. He heard footsteps, softer and lighter than Gabriella's, but he recognised them just the same. "Em," he said evenly, his back still to her. "What are you doing? Mom told you to stay at home. I hate being all alone. It's boring." "I knew you'd come out here." He grinned at her and took a seat on the same tree trunk he and Gabriella had shared, what seemed like ages ago. She immediately followed suit. After a moment, Skye looked his sister in the eye. 20,653,964. For the first time, he thanked his ability. "How did you save me?" "What do you mean?" Skye asked. He hadn't mentioned it since it had happened a week ago. "The bus. If you hadn't stopped me, I would have crashed into it, and I'd probably have died." "How did you know?" The look she gave him was both inquisitive and thoughtful. He began to say, "I heard it coming," but couldn't. Instead, he told her the truth. "You mean you knew I was going to die?" she asked, as though she couldn't believe it, and Skye didn't blame her. He just nodded, then explained as much of the rules as he knew himself. It was the fact that if he saved someone, another person, someone close to him, would die in consequence. That befuddled Emma. "But you saved me, and no one died, right?" She looked up at him to confirm the fact. "Yeah, that's because I was supposed to save you." He fiddled with ways to explain it to someone so young. "I didn't understand that at first either, but the thing that stood out about you was your lifetime. That's what I call, basically, how long you have left to live. Anyway, your lifetime dropped and rose, then dropped and rose again, instead of just decreasing at a steady rate. It took me a while, but eventually I realised that it was doing that because it couldn't tell whether you would die then or not. Or, well, yeah, basically that." He figured that was complex enough for her. He didn't want her to get overwhelmed. "Was that how Dad died?" Emma asked, after her brother hadn't said anything for a few minutes. Skye transformed the question to what it seemed to imply. "Is it your fault he's dead?" Again, he nodded. "What was Dad like?" "You don't remember?" "I was 3, she said, laughing. "So, tell me about him." So Skye recounted to her his fondest memories of their father. He had an old green umbrella that was torn at the seams and covered in holes. He used to drive Mum crazy, bringing it with them when they went on walks in the rain. You know she hates anything even slightly damaged, but he wouldn't throw it out. Mum kept it, though, after he died. It's in the attic. I found it a few years ago. Skye paused. He told stories. "What kind of stories?" "Stories about a goblin. He lives in the cave on the other side of that hill." He pointed towards the half-hidden golden hill off in the distance, beneath the tree whose branches are always bare. "The goblin's had an immense treasure," Dad said, "and it's hidden in that cave." "Did you ever see the goblins?" Emma asked. "It's just a story, Em. Dad made it up. It's not real." "I believe it."
And so ends Saved. We hope you enjoyed the story. Drop by the forum and tell us what you think. Visit castofwonders.org/forums and tell us. We'd love to hear from you. Cast of Wonders is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Share it, but don't change it or sell it. The theme music is Appeal to Heavens by Alexei Knoll from musicalley.com. Join us next time for Cockatrice Girl Meets Statue Boy by Willow Fagan.